everybody. Welcome back to Money Talks with Alex.
Join me on my journey to financial freedom.
Let's get started.
So I would say it's common knowledge that it's better to buy than to rent.
Yeah.
And because when you're renting, you're just kind of throwing those monthly payments away. But if you're paying a mortgage, it's more of an investment because in a few years or however long, you can turn around and sell your house or condo or whatever you own, hopefully for a profit. So why is it that not everybody buys? Like, I'm imagining there must be something that holds people back.
Yeah, that's a very good question because that's what I've been asking myself. When I moved to the U.S. and apparently rent is a very popular choice, and I was surprised. Coming from where I come from, I'm not used to, living off of rent for like very long time. So I was asking, I was trying to get to the, to the reasoning as to why people prefer rent. What I found is rent gives the flexibility. So let's start with, why rent is good. And then slowly, I guess, when I start talking about disadvantages, I'll move on to buying, right? So rent is good in a sense, it gives you the flexibility to move around. A lot of people move from state to state, and it's very hard, to move with a lot of stuff. And don't want the complication of having to sell a house, and if you have to move but the market is not good, you're eating up a lot of the difference between what you owe and how much the house costs. So, and the paperwork that, people don't want to deal with and don't have the time, quite frankly, to deal with it. And I think the biggest issue is that to buy a mortgage, you have to have down payment. You have to be much more responsible about it because in rent, if you don't, you could just move to a low cost if things change, right? You move from a better neighborhood to a less better neighborhood where you can save on the rent if things change. When you have mortgage, you cannot do that very flexibly. You can't just, if you sell and the market is not good, then you have to stay or you have to eat up the loss. You know what I mean? So there is a lot of responsibility when you buy a mortgage. And then there is, coming up with a down payment, which a lot of people struggle with. And I think the fact that they're committing to a 15 or 30 years for a loan is just intimidating. It feels like it. But if you think about it, you're committing to a 30-year loan, right? And then you're free. You live off in the house practically for free. You still have to pay taxes and, for the, maintaining the house or the apartment, but you don't have to pay the amount of rent you pay. But just the fact that it's intimidating, you feel that there's a commitment, it throws you off, which is understandable. But if you can make your peace with it, that'll solve so much of your problem down the long term, right? So transitioning to mortgage, the biggest issue that people have with buying, besides the commitment that I just discussed, is the down payment. Coming up with the down payment could be a pretty huge amount. Plus, you have closing costs as well. So it's a pretty big amount for some families or individuals to come up with. And that part is also intimidating. Plus the process is pretty complex. That is, again, intimidating. So I think that whole process is besides the flexibility, is a bigger chunk of why people don't buy. But to that, I'll say, if you have issue with the process, there are a ton of resources out there that you can, you can familiarize yourself with the process and know what to do. And then the down payment, or programs with as low as 3% down payment requirement, which is, I think, a reasonable sum to come up with. Depending on your finances, you can create a budget. Again, a lot of resources out there for that too. You create a budget and you save every month a certain amount and that goes towards that down payment. So let's just say, for example, you identify based on your monthly payment that you can reasonably afford, and then you define how much mortgage you afford. Let's say you came up with a number 200,000, just out of the blue number, and so the 3% out of the 200 is 6,000, right? And so 6,000 plus, let's say for closing costs, 4,000. It might be higher, might be lower. I'm just putting out numbers randomly. And so total you need is 10,000. And then given that, you can afford the monthly, which surprisingly, the monthly is always the same, not always, but majority of part, it's the same as, you're renting. It's very similar. Like that part doesn't really change much.
Right.
And in one case, you're growing equity, which basically means that, you're having like an investment that you can sell that belongs to you, and on the other hand, you're just burning your cash. So the only part that you need is the down payment, for which you can budget. And so you do that. You have the amount, and then you start learning what the process is. There are courses completely for free out there. I think some banks provide them too, that you can study what the process is. Some governmental agencies provide those too, that you can study what the process is and prepare yourself, and just make sure to read all the documents that the seller provides, to make sure that you do your own search. No, not search. What was the checking everything? What was it called?
Checking everything.
You do your own
Research?
walkthrough of the house apartment to make sure that nothing's wrong, and just basically do homework before buying.
Right.
And to look out for everything that could go wrong, and prepare yourself for that. You don't have to rush yourself. You can go at a pace that you're comfortable with. But I feel like if you take that step, it is part of the wealth building for future generation, for your long term. You don't want in retirement to be thinking about to come up with a rent, or whether your retirement savings is enough to pay for a rent. And when you pay off your mortgage, the taxes part is not too big. It could be several hundreds, depending on your house, of course, and the county and the city you're in, but it could be several hundreds to pay every month, which would be manageable in retirement.
So you mentioned the down payment and also a mortgage being 15 or 30 years. What would be, are there any strategies around deciding how much you put for a down payment and the length of the loan? Or is it just kind of whatever you can afford to do?
That's a good question. So there is, not a straight answer to that, because it depends. I know a lot of people hate to hear it, but that's actually how it is. It depends. For example, if you put less than 20% down on a mortgage, then there's something called PMI. Mortgage insurance. I can't remember the P. Payment. No, I think. Okay, it's basically mortgage insurance.
Okay.
It's
payment, or I can't remember what the P was, but it's mortgage insurance. Sure. Are we both looking at that? I guess. Wait, okay, then I'll just look at myself. Because this thing is bugging me. Private mortgage insurance. Private, okay.
Yeah, private mortgage insurance. And what that basically means is when you put lower than 20%, the risk is higher for the lender, right? Because you have less equity in the home, which means you're probably less likely to pay it off and not just default on it and leave it. So when you pay less than 20%, you need an insurance for the mortgage, and pay in case you default. Then I think the bank can use that insurance for the loan. So the payment for the insurance varies depending on your credit history, how likely you are to pay off, and your income history, everything. So basically whatever you used to apply for the mortgage, that mortgage will define your PMI as well. How many percentage will it be? So for most part, it's not a substantial amount, which means, you know, if you put down 3 or 5%, it's totally okay to eat that cost up, you know, for the sake of building your equity. Which I personally like to do. Like, I don't think it's necessary for you to save up 20% because the amount is high and you'll just be wasting your time just, you know, burning your cash on rent and not building equity. So personally, I don't mind the PMI part. So if you can afford, you know, 3%, and if you think that, you know, you can save up within a certain period for the 3%, that's totally okay. But I would add this: when you sign up for the 3% or 5% or 10%, you know, anything that is less than 20%, if you think you can do 10, you shouldn't just do 10. You need to calculate which one's better, 5% to 10%, because well, right now the interest rates are pretty high. So like in this case, for example, it might be different, but when the you know, the interest rates were average or like low recently, when you calculate it, you could see the difference, the savings that you could have between 5 and 10% is minimal. And the interest rate on your loan doesn't change. So what I personally like to do, I would request, you know, the lender, I'd request them for quotes for different percentages for down payment, which, you know, and then I'll see which one makes sense. For long-term savings, and I don't count it throughout the 30 years. I count it within 5 years, because like, what are the chances they're going to stay at the same place for 30 years? They're low, right? And you want to count the 5 years because chances are you're going to stay there 5 years, and you have to stay at a place for 5 years for it to, like, you know, increase in price, because real estate is not volatile, but it has its, you know, its cycles, so to speak. Like it might, like within a year, like you could buy a house and it will go down within a year, and which means if within a year you sell it, you're gonna be at a loss. So you shouldn't buy a mortgage if you think that you're gonna stay a year or two. 2 is not even enough. So you want to, like, if you want to commit to a mortgage, you should go with a thought that, yeah, you probably will stay there for 5 years. And I usually do all my calculations within 5 years, certain interest rate, because when you apply for a loan, like, they'll give you an options for interest rates, and whatever interest rate you choose, you need to calculate within 5 years what kind of return or what kind of expenses it's going to cost you. So that's how you make your decision. And you know, as far as 15 or 30 years, it again depends. 15 years is usually higher monthly payments. I personally don't really like the 15 years ones. I prefer the 30 years, mainly because the interest rate difference that you get between 15 and 30 might not be as substantial. Again, you calculate that, you know, if that makes sense to you. If you can afford 15 years, maybe, but I think what's ideal, you take a 30 years, right? And if you can pay more, you just pay more, right? And then basically reach that, because initially how it works is you pay mostly interest. There's very small amount of that goes to your mortgage. You mainly pay interest. That's how the banks, I guess, protect themselves, because you don't have much equity like you have it later, because they want the interest, you know, back. So it kind of lessens the risk for them, I would assume. So you can pay towards your principal earlier if you want to, but with 15 years, you're gonna risk higher payments, and then, you know, if something happens financially, you might not be able to. Whereas in 30 years, you have the flexibility to pay more if you can, and if you cannot, you can stick to the monthly and just, you know, be fine. Like, you wouldn't have any delinquencies or any like late payments and issues with your credit score, like none of that.
Okay.
And just one more addition, like the 3% and 5%, the 3% specifically, I think, is usually by those types of loan that are specifically for low credit score and low income families that could, use the 3%. And I'm not sure about how that they, cover the interest rates, because usually if you're higher risk, with low credit score and low income, usually your interest rates will suffer, like the interest rate will go higher. So you need to calculate in all cases how it will benefit you and how many costs will incur in the process. And I think that'll help you decide which one to go with.
Gotcha. Okay. I have a few questions.
All right.
First, what exactly is equity? Is it basically whatever money are going towards your house?
Okay, so equity is when they say equity in your house is basically the ownership in your house. So when you buy a mortgage, you don't own the house. The bank owns the house, or whoever the lender owns the house. And like on paper, right? So they own the house, and you're you're on the title, but they're the primary holder on the title. So the more you put down towards your house, the more percentage of the house you own. When you put 20% or 5%, that means that you own 5% of the house right now, and the rest is owned by the lender. And then the more you pay, the more ownership you get on the house, and that's basically called equity.
Cool. And so you also said, so initially you would typically pay just interest.
Yes, that's how.
And then you mentioned the word principal. What is that?
So that's the payment towards the house.
So like the mortgage itself.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So you have, you have the interest part, which initially that's how the schedule is, that you pay, like the payment towards the principal or the house is like little, and then its majority of it is the interest. And then once you pay those, and then you start, I can't remember which year it starts, but yeah, it starts later. But if you choose to, if you pay additional than what your monthly is, that goes to your house payment.
And then you also mentioned there not being much of a difference in interest rate between 5% down payment and 10% down payment as an example.
So, for example, if you put 5% and 10%, with 10% it's less risky, right? Because think about it this way. So the more interest you have in the house, in a sense, like the more ownership of the house you have, the more motivated you are to complete the whole mortgage and get it all right. If you pay 5%, it's little. So there's data and previous studies that home ownership, usually the lower you have in the house, in the permanent lower ownership, the higher likely you are to default on it. You just wouldn't care. Like if you pay 20%, you're paying like 50 to 60,000 on a house, and you have a lot of interest. Like you paid all that money, but when you pay 5%, which like 6,000 to 4,000, you might not have as much interest in not defaulting on it.
Right.
Because it's probably like a few months worth of rent, and you live a few months, and so it's just higher likeliness that, because it's higher likeliness that you're going to default, the higher risk it is. So the the interest rate change. The interest rate is basically defining, so the risk. So basically, if a lender is taking the risk, he needs this much return.
Right.
It's a very similar logic when you would buy a stock, and you're like, this is very risky, and this is how much return I'll need, right? And then you count the value for that. So the interest rate is something that is basically counting how much return I want for the risk I'm taking. So the bank is giving you that interest rate, basically saying that, okay, this is the return I would need from this mortgage because I'm taking this much risk that your background is providing.
Yeah.
So if you pay 10%, the risk goes a little down, but not enough for you to make good savings on the interest rate difference.
Okay.
And if you want an example, I can't remember the exact numbers, but when I was I was shopping around for mortgages, like there was 3.25 for 5%, and I think for 10% it like increased a little. Decreased a little. No, it didn't decrease. The way it works is they'll give you like a schedule of different interest rates, and the lower you go, you need to pay points.
Okay.
So you basically buying that interest rate.
Okay.
And then the higher you go, then you basically having negative points, which means the lender is going to pay you for that interest rate. Does that make sense?
No.
So that was new to me as well. I don't think I've heard it anywhere. Maybe it was somewhere, but I didn't really come across it. But what they'll provide you is different interest rate at different points. It's a point system.
Okay.
So like if it's lower, you can pay them to buy that interest rate, because low interest rate, high risk, and you need to put in money for it.
What do you mean they'll buy the interest rate?
So it's not buying, but like, it's like a schedule of different interest rate level, like say not now, but yeah, when it was all low, it was like 2.8, 2.5, but like there were points for that interest rate that you had to pay to get that interest rate.
Points?
Yeah.
That you had to pay?
Yeah.
Like prices that you had to pay?
Yeah, they call it points, but you can call it however you want to. But
Okay.
the point was, you had to buy.
Why?
To get that interest rate, because it's lower, and if you want your monthly payment to go. Here's how I think one of the lenders explained me. It's basically putting money up front for the interest payment.
It's like a down payment for the interest payment.
I think that's a better. It's like, would you rather pay? Because either way you're gonna pay, right? If you get the 3.25, it's just gonna be distributed over. The monthly, because your monthly go up, and then so your monthly goes up, but you don't have to pay for the interest rate right now. But it's it's scattered throughout the monthly payments, and then if you go lower, you pay lower throughout all those years, but you pay them up front. Because all of that schedule is also based on your background.
Okay.
So that's how it's created, and practically all of them are supposed to be the same. But again, the way I would count is within 5 years, which one of these will give me better return, or gonna save me more money. And for me, always I'd rather distribute it throughout the years rather than paying it up front, because money up front is always worth more than later. Time value of money. If I have it now, I can just scatter it, put it in a interest-bearing account or in stocks or in an index fund, and it's it's going to earn money, and then I'll pay slowly over the years.
Okay.
To put it, I guess, in simple terms. But
so you would rather have like a lower, like pay less up front so that you can invest that money.
Yeah. Again, it depends,
elsewhere.
Because like I could have gone like higher than 3.25%, for example, and like because it's negative, like they'll pay me for those, and then I'll pay them throughout the years. But then when I count within 5 years, those didn't make sense. So you need to find a sweet spot where because like you could use those also to cover some of your closing costs if you go negative. I don't want to overcomplicate this, to be honest, because I think once you start the process, like you'll understand. The lender is supposed to explain you everything, and you can ask as many questions as you want, as many times. If you didn't understand it one time, ask again. Like, don't feel shy. This is a 30-year-old commitment you're doing, and it's a lot of money. And for some people, it's like the biggest investment in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So you better like understand every single bit of it. So ask as many questions as you'd like to try to understand it, and maybe the lenders will will explain it better. But You have to like, find that sweet spot, which is, good for you. And it's all calculation, just to, basic calculations of how much it's going to cost me each month for different interest rate, because they're not necessarily the same. Like, you need to find something that is good for short term and longer term down the road. You don't want to increase your monthly too much that, later you'll be like, oh yeah, I should have, because when money up front, high chances are like you're gonna spend them somehow. So you gotta be like very careful about that.
So would you say like the main variables are choosing between the 15-year or 30-year loan, which will either increase or decrease your monthly payment, right? And then choosing your down payment amount to determine your interest rate.
Right.
And also taking into account that if you're under a 20% down payment, you'll be paying that PMI.
Yes.
And so just kind of like taking into account all of those variables to determine what your monthly payment will be.
Yes, so monthly payment, the way I go about it, when you go to like the apps that provide listings, they usually have a pretty good amount of what your monthly is. The good thing is that they have the principal plus interest, and then they have the taxes amount based on historical taxes that I was paying. You need to consider the taxes might, increase slightly just because the value of the land will increase a little, because that's how the taxes are calculated. So, but I think it's a very good, like I didn't have any issue with that monthly, like it was very close. And taxes and insurance is another payment that you have to do.
Right.
Like you have to get insurance for the house, and just bearing in mind that you will be responsible for all the repairs, whatever goes wrong in your apartment, and or like conforming with the city guidelines or requirements as to how tall your lawn is supposed to be, like taking care of all that, or that not having a tree or whatever. So you need to know that like that's a responsibility. You need to take care of all of those, and then have some money per month for that. So like to have like it could be $100 to $200 per month, but those $100 to $200 needs to be accounted for.
Yeah.
I think another thing I want to add is that when you want to buy a house, you need to prepare. So you need to prepare the credit score. If it's low, it's while you're budgeting, it's a good that's a good time to also work on your credit score, because the lower the credit score, of course, the higher the interest rate, because risk is higher. So I think if you have 750 is really good. Everything above that is kind of the same. If you have 800 versus 750 is not a big difference. They fall under the same category, which is pretty good. And then I think everything lower than that is like 700, you could still do good. But when you have 600, like it might be a good credit score for you, but for interest rate, like I think you can save pretty good if you boost it up to 700, 750. There are a lot of strategies that you could use to boost your score, like opening another line of credit card to increase the overall balance of line of credit that is available to you. Then there is you could also do pay out your credit cards, because when you have, there's something called it's the utilization rate, which means basically how much of the line of credit that is available to you have you used, and the lower it is, the better your credit score. So if you open a line of credit and at the same time pay out a bunch of those, it's going to do really good to your credit card. And it usually takes time to boost up your score, which is it's pretty common knowledge that when it drops very quickly, but climbing up is very slow. So you need to take that to account, which means you need to at least prepare a year ahead. I think a year is a good timeline for you to focus on it and to get it really really high. And then also, I think another thing is just do your research about the process to know it really good. And I know the documents that are provided by the sellers are usually boring in a lot of them, but just go through them. Like, it'll save you so much money down the road to not get into an issue. And then also to do a good search around the house, like pay attention to everything. Is there some pipe that is leaking? Like, just open all the water, see how everything flows, flush the toilet several times, just to make sure that it's doing okay. And or try checking the roof, like big items that will cost you a lot of money if they're not right, because a lot of the times, unfortunately, sellers do do some cosmetic fixtures just so during the walkthrough it's not visible. It happens, right? So do your homework. Not even your realtor will do anything for you, unfortunately. Like, yes, they're going to provide you with certain information, that is required by law, basically. They're not going to, check the, the roof for you or refrigerator, nothing. It's all on you to do your homework, to go through and, check as long as you want to. You're buying a big house. Don't feel shy of, checking this, checking that, or spending hours in the house. It's okay. You're buying a very expensive item. So you have all the rights to do all the checking. I think that's something I know that a lot of people feel shy about for, whatever reason. But it's just, it's part of the process. Oh, and negotiate, depending on what the market is, negotiate. Put an offer. I would suggest put an offer lower than you would want to, so that, if there's a
compromise.
No, yeah, so that, you have that room for compromising and at the same time getting what you want. But you got to be mindful about it. You do that only, I like to say that when you're buying a house, don't think that that's the only house that you love. There's so many houses that you're gonna love, so don't get attached. That way, if there's a higher bidder, you're okay. You're not gonna maximize your budget just so you can get that house. So that way, you also have negotiation power. Like, you can negotiate it down, and you're not going to be spooked by another bidder. That possibility of there is another bidder. So sometimes it's just a strategy, to get you to increase your offer. That there's another bidder.
Right.
Maybe I have trust issues. I don't know. But I think that's
no. It's like, and you get scared that they'll choose the other offer over yours, so you want to make yours better.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just understanding what's going on and trying to get the best you can.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so basically, do your research, do your calculations, know what you'll be paying and for how long, and where your money's going. And then also, don't be scared to ask questions. And don't be scared to take your time looking at whatever place you're buying.
Yeah, so it's just like simple advice, but like a lot of people overlook those.
Yeah.
Just because they're so like, duh.
Cool.
There's another way to get into real estate with like lower upfront costs, which is you can buy REITs. They're real estate investment trusts. Those are the companies who invest in real estate, and they're like a stock. And then, like, you can get exposure to real estate through that way, because real estate is considered more stable, comparatively more stable investment. And then also there is like, you buy property, you fix it, and then you sell it. That's good for like some people who work in construction, for example. They're redoing it, for a living, so they might as well get into that kind of business where that's how they make, an extra, because those are pretty good rewards if you do it right. But you don't have to be in construction. You could just be someone but you have to have money for that. And you could, so that is, I think, the less relatable part, where not many people want to get in real estate. It's a lot of work, and yeah, you need more money than regular stocks.
Great. So I think that wraps up this video.
Yep.
This conversation. If you enjoy these talks and learning alongside me, stay tuned for our next video.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Actual information.
Cool.
Cool.
Alrighty.
Let's start this party.
I can't even see myself.
I know. I like.
Do you need to eat a donut?
Huh?
Do you need to eat a donut?
No, I need to sing a song, karaoke song. That's what I did last week, and
Now that we've energized ourselves and dehydrated ourselves.
buy a house. So the way you go about it is you start. Is it you?
That wasn't me.
I think it's Ava.
It might have been
What the hell is that?
I don't know.
Ava. I think it's her, because it sounds like it's an herb. It's her.
Really? What is she doing?
I mean, I hope it's her, because otherwise, let's leave her apartment. But,
what do we say at the end?
I